The High Court has granted an urgent bid by the state capture inquiry for its term to be extended. Judge Selby Baqwa found that the extension the inquiry was seeking was in the public interest. Let me take you to Karyn Maugha. She is a senior reporter for News 24, specialist reporter that is. Karyn, good evening to you. Firstly, let's just talk about the reasons, at least provided in the judgment, for why the judge felt that the argument or case being made by the commission was a credible one and that they needed to be heard.
Well, essentially, Judge Selby Baqwa finding very much in support of DCJ Raymond Zondo, who had deposed to the affidavit in the case, in which he said, look, if I had ceased hearing and evidence at the end of March, which was when I was initially supposed to, there were a number of witnesses which the commission wouldn't have been able to hear from, which would have potentially left it vulnerable to legal challenge. Now, we know, for example, that the commission in that space from March to now has heard from people like Brian Molefe, Anaj Singh, Malusi Gigaba, some of the most heavily implicated people in the evidence already led by the commission. And Baqwa essentially agreeing that Zono, had made a decision that was really about preventing the inquiry from being challenged legally, and agreeing that part of that prevention of potential legal challenge would be in granting this extension so that the remaining 6 witnesses and President Cyril Ramaphosa can be called, can complete the evidence, and the inquiry can then hand over its report to the President on the 30th of September 2021.
Of course, one of the challenges for Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is going to be the scope upon which he limits part of the work that he has done. We've had multiple bodies go to him, Karyn, to speak about state capture, the likes of Open Secrets making an argument for why state capture needs to go even beyond just the 8 or 10 years that they've been focused on at the Commission.
Well, absolutely. I mean, recently we've had revelations about the suppression, for example, of apartheid-era prosecutions by the Mbeki administration. There has been an inherent culture of interference in the NPA, law enforcement, the kickback culture that has defined a lot of the tender, happenings that have surrounded government even now in the time period that we're experiencing have not changed. So, allocating state capture is simply a phenomenon that occurred under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma, as he then was, is disingenuous and it's incorrect. I mean, part of what the inquiry is ultimately called to do, Cathy, is to evaluate on the evidence before them and to make substantive findings of wrongdoing, certainly in relation to the so-called capture of massive parastatals like Eskom, Transnet, and of course the Free State government, which we know were where the bulk of the 57 billion rand in state capture contracts, or that tainted by them, were spent. But it needs to go beyond that and look at preventing this kind of phenomena from ever occurring again. And strengthening institutions so that they aren't as easily broken and swayed as they have been in the previous years. And there is a feeling from a number of the NGOs and the parastatals that, and organizations supporting reform in parastatals, that, these findings need to be made now and the inquiry needs to come to an end. A lot of these issues can be referred on further to law enforcement, and Zondo has suggested that he may make further suggestions that certain areas that he has been unable to get to be themselves the subject of further inquiries and future law enforcement investigations.
Of course, the issues that are left on the periphery, Karyn, and that won't form a bulk of the report that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo will put together. Many people won't really have an appetite to see multiple commissions of inquiries held to ensure that there is accountability even for that. Do you think that there's going to be a situation where the judge in this instance makes recommendations for how those matters should be dealt with?
I think you raise a fundamentally important point, and it was something that Judge Baqwa actually referred to in his ruling, where he basically said, look, there has been a lot of criticism over this issue, this perception, which many South Africans have, and I would argue justifiably so, that anything that is seen as politically, socially, economically problematic gets referred to a commission of inquiry, and nothing further really happens with it. And I mean, the most glaring of those was the first one that we had, the TRC, where there was a referral for 300 cases to prosecution, which never went anywhere. And South Africans are sick and tired, of being told, listen, your body politic is riddled with the cancer of corruption, but let's sew you up and let's go on our way and pretend that we didn't know or see that this happened. And let's hope that in some far distant future, law enforcement does something about it. There's an argument, and I think it's a powerful one, that instead of spending a lot of money on commissions, that money should be channeled towards law enforcement. It should be channeled towards the Hawks. It should be channeled towards forensic capability within the NPA. It should be channeled towards all the kind of things that the inquiries had access to in terms of some of the best investigators in the country to uncover the kind of issues that the inquiry has been able to do to uncover, but also to substantively ensure that people are brought to book and that there are proper prosecutions, proper asset forfeiture processes, and ultimately proper accountability.
Karyn, let's talk about the 6 witnesses specifically that the Commission says it still needs to hear from before it can conclude its work. What do we know about them?
Well, there are a number of people who have been pushing to be heard. We know that one of them, of course, is the former head of state security, Arthur Fraser, who has been somewhat of a linchpin figure in, a lot of the very serious allegations that have been made about alleged malfeasance within the intelligence community and its politicization. We know that he has said he wants to come to the Commission and testify, but maintains that he will be unable to do so in the way that he would want to because of the classified information that he wants to have declassified before he's prepared to come. Now, as far as I know, having spoken to his lawyer, there doesn't seem to be any indication that he has actually been summoned or will appear, and there seems to be some issue over the fact that his affidavit is not signed because he wants all these various materials to be declassified. Of course, the suspended ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule also at the heart of a number of allegations in relation to the asbestos matter in the Free State, for example, facing questions of the Stena Dairy Project scandal, had indicated that he was prepared to go to the inquiry. Having spoken to his lawyers, no invitation as yet has been extended to him. We do know that one of the people who is very likely to take the stand again is Dudu Myeni. That there have been, she has come previously and given evidence, initially very reluctantly, initially refusing to, but subsequent to the Commission taking a stance and saying in the wake of the Jacob Zuma ruling in the Concourt that unless she was specifically going to, identify which crime she believed she was being incriminated in, she had to answer the questions put to her, and she has done so. Beyond that, Cathy, we've obviously got people within law enforcement, the former head of the NPA, Sean Abrams, who hasn't testified. We know that he's made submissions to the inquiry. Birding Ntlameza, the former head of the Hawks, a number of very serious allegations about the so-called capture of law enforcement to achieve political ends. So those are the kind of people, who the public would certainly want to hear from. But if they're the witnesses that the inquiry has in mind, we simply don't know at this point.
Specialist legal reporter Karyn Maugha, we're going to leave it there for tonight.